are holding literally on 46A4, 46A4, Tanu Rabbanan. And it's going to repeat the Gemara we had before. Ha'osis, and again, the only thing we have to understand is this, what we do today with the brachot and everything else, to how we make it, is because we're working it out through this Gemara. At the time of this Gemara, they were still going back and forth. Do we make a bracha? Do we not make a bracha? And we need to remember there's a tata disasra, there's a contradiction at the end of Sukkot. Just like you have 2 days at the beginning of Sukkot because of Suffolk, because of the Suffolk of in Chutz La'aretz, which day is the first day, which is the first day of Yontif. So by definition, Shmini Atzeres is either a Yontif b'fnei atzmai. Shmini Atzeres, the 8th day, is either a holiday on its own, or in fact, it's the 7th day of Sukkot. If the 2nd day of Sukkot is really the first day, then the 7th day is really the 8th day. So this is all a big chulent, as they say, and we're going to work it all out. But anyways, here we are, 46A4. 46A4. We're going to try to do it at a canter, at a little bit of speed. But as we know, first of all, we have a major problem. Just as an aside, Jeff came in with a Boston Red Sox hat. And that right away is throwing me off completely. So, okay, so I just on the side, because you should always start a shir with a joke. So when they were building the new Yankee Stadium, believe it or not, one of the workers was actually a Boston Red Sox fan. So he buried a Red Sox T-shirt in the foundation of Yankee Stadium. When George Steinbrenner heard about it, he made them drill it down and spend tens of thousands of dollars just to get the T-shirt out of the ground, which then leads to the second story. When people heard about that, 2 Yankee fans drove the 5 hours from New York to Boston. And as you know, Boston Stadium, Boston's Red Sox Stadium is right on the street. Right, it's right on the street. Anyways, they drove the car to the street. It's right to the back of the stadium. They got out. They decided to urinate on the stadium. And then they got back in the car and drove back to New York. That's so. Here we go.
Yitzchak.
Yeah.
Yitzchak.
Yeah.
How come you were never on Jeopardy?
The kasha for masa. All right. I wondered about that myself. I was very good at Jeopardy.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's it. Right. All right. The difference is, as Elon, the great joke is, the Arabs, when they get upset, they blow up the building. The Jews get upset, they buy the building, fix it up, and sell it for 5 times its original value. Right, exactly. Exactly. Tanu Rabbanan. Here we go. If somebody makes a sukkah for himself, and as we learned yesterday, that means when he builds it. This Gemara was talking about not before Yom Tif, 46A4, right over here, Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, I says Sukka la'atzmai. He makes a baruch shechianu when he builds it before Sukkot. And when he get on Sukkot, nichnatz liyashiba, when he comes on Sukkot to sit in the Sukkah, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Kedishanu b'mitzvahs v'tzivanu leishev b'sukkah, to sit in the Sukkah. If the Sukkah was already standing from the previous year, if he's able to make something new, then he should make a shechianu. What is something new? Either put in new schach or do something new with the walls. But the halacha is, even if you go ahead, even where you can go ahead and put in noyes sukkah. That means even if you put in decorations into the sukkah, that's enough of a change to be able to say this. It's an halacha. Go look. If you look, right. If you put in the TV set for the Yankees, right. But you can see if you look at the bottom, I believe the article also brings it down. Let's see, number 27. Here, It's alternative. He may beautify the sukkah in some way. Just it. That's all you have to do. That's all you got to do. Even though his sukkah is enough. The im lav, but if he's not able to add anything new, liichnosis the yashiv baruch shtayim. He should make the shechiyonu not when he builds the sukkah, but in fact on sukkahs when he comes into the sukkah for the first time. Make a leishe basukah, followed it by not yet, followed by shechiyonu. That's what this man Yom is saying. Omar, no. Now this is what we do. Omar Ravashi, Chazina Leila Rav Kahana de Kamaluhu Lukula Akosa de Kedusha. I saw Rav Kahana say all these blessings. In other words, Leishe Basukah and Shechianu by Kiddush. And what is it that we do? That's the way we pass. We've come now to the way we do it. How do we do it? We do not make a Shechianu when we build the sukkah. We make the Shechianu on sukkah itself with its minimum. And we include it all in together. That's why, right? So that is why we make Shechianu first. We make the Kaddish, you switch it back and forth, and that is the reason why. One where you're doing it to include the sukkah, and one for the Yom Tov as a whole. Okay, in other words, Jeff, we switch the order of the Shechiyanu. In one thing we lay Shei Basukah first and then Shechiyanu, which is to say we're making the Shechiyanu on the fact that we're sitting in the sukkah. The next day we make Kiddush and make the Shechiyanu, and afterwards we make the Leisha Basukah. We stick the Shechiyanu after Kiddush, after be sanctifying the holiday. So we're on one Kiddush at night, we're giving the Shechiyanu for the sukkah itself. The next day we're sanctifying, we're sticking the Shechiyanu together with the sanctification of the holiday. So this way we're covering all sides of our question here. Now, Tanu Rabbanan, if a person has many mitzvahs to be done, he can instead, this Madhyama says, just make one bracha on all the mitzvahs. Baruch Hashem kedishanu b'mitzvahs v'tzivanu al ha-mitzvahs, on the mitzvahs. Rabbi Yehuda no, mevarech hakol achas v'achas b'fnei atzmo. He recites a blessing on each and every mitzvah individually, and that's the way we hold. You make a bracha on every mitzvah individually. Amar Rav Zeira v'Yitem Rav Chanina bar Papa, Hilchasuk Rav Yehuda, the halacha is like Rav Yehuda, every mitzvah gets its own thing. But Amar Rav Zeira v'Yitem Rav Chanina bar Papa, my Tamad Rav Yehuda, what's the reason behind Rav Yehuda's sak, that you make a bracha on every single mitzvah? Because it says, Baruch Hashem yoim yoim, bless Hashem day by day. Do we only bless him by day and we don't bless him at night? Ella it comes to teach us. Every single day, give him his blessings. That means on all the things that come along that are appropriate to give a blessing, give individual blessings. And we were on 46.85. Hachanami, over here where we have all these mitzvahs, the whole davar v'davar, and every single mitzvah, tang loy me'eber chosav, give him his own mitzvah. But Amar Rav Zeira v'Yitem Rav Chanina bar Papa, Bo re'ei shaloi kamidas HaKadosh Baruch Hu kamidas basav v'dam. Take a look and see that the midos, the characteristics of Hashem are not like the characteristics of flesh and blood. Midas basavadam, the meat of flesh and blood, earthly matters, clay rake on an empty vessel. If I have an empty utensil, we're now on Amid Beis, Memvav Amid Beis, 46b1. Machzik, obviously, an empty vessel can hold as much as you fill it up, right? You can fill it up. Mole, but once the vessel is full, ain't no machzik. Once the vessel is full, even if you keep pouring into it, what happens? It just spills out on the table. Right? Masha'enken, Avomidas, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the characteristics of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is just the opposite. Mole, if somebody is full of Torah, Magzik, he holds even more. Reikon, if he's empty, ain't no Magzik, nothing sticks. Shenema v'hoya im shamoya tishma. If you will listen to the voice of Hashem. If shamoya tishma. If you will listen, then you'll be designed to listen more. V'im lav lo tishma. Davar acha im shamoya b'yoshan. If you will listen to the old, says Rashi, the fourth line from the top. Magzir al tamuda shamata. You chazer, you review what you learned. So in other words, it sticks in your head. Tishba b'chodosh, guess what? The new stuff will stick in your head too. V'im yifne levavcha, but if your heart turns away, but if you abandon what you have learned by failing to review it, shuv loy tishma, then you will not listen, you will not be granted additional insight. Yeah, Danny.
The same material, each time you're going to see something new.
A new insight, a greater insight. But it's something else. What it is like this. If one starts learning, it doesn't matter what age you are. If one starts learning, when you first start learning, you're lost, right? The first 30 days are very hard. But then all of a sudden, you find that you start asking questions that are pertinent to the daf. By the time you've gone 60 days, you begin to get the cadence of the learning. By the time you've done it 90 days, you're already a Talmud Chacham, because you begin to understand both the legalese and the spiritual side of the legalese, how it all flows together, and how one topic flows to the next topic, and how one theory can be applied somewhere else, and how it can be applied today, etc. And all of a sudden, you're swimming in the sea, which is why it's called the Yam HaTalmud, the sea of the Talmud, because it's literally like you dive into the deep water, right? Before you know it, you're treading water, and before you know, you're swimming in it. And it does it not prove out to be true? Right? That's the way it is. The more you learn, the more you find you're swimming like a champion. And you don't realize how fast it happens. And that's what the Gemara is really saying. The Gemara is saying is you can't be afraid. The other way to look at this Gemara is switching. You can't be afraid to dive in. Many people don't start learning because they're afraid. They're embarrassed. They're afraid to say it. Until you dive in, you realize there was nothing. But like all beginnings are hard. Anticipation, you know the statement, anticipation is worse than reality. That's in everything in life. Our brains get in the way of jumping in. It's almost like that in business. You don't worry about all the pitfalls that might come, you'll never invest. Or to quote Lahavdil Elfei Abdullah, the rose by Bette Midler. The rose that's always afraid of dying never gets to live. Right? That's just the reality. That's our achas kama b'kama with Torah. Because Torah has this beautiful thing. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And the more you learn, the more you still realize. And every time you learn, something new pops out. You look at the Gemara differently. Something new grabs you, and now you're in a different direction. And it's all emes. All of it is the words of the living God. Because there's a million ways of learning a thing. And that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Like this, there are two different types of food, like the Gashmi food and the spiritual food.
Right, the physical and the spiritual.
Material food, Gashmi food that we're eating is, we always want to eat, but then we're satiated.
Right.
However, the Torah, we don't want to eat.
Right.
Once we eat, we never get
to it. So what is that pasuk? Is the song that is sung by the new Shlomo Kabbalah, the guy who took over Green. He says that the pasuk in Navi is going to come a time when there's going to be a great thirst in the land. Loy lelechem, v'loy b'mayim, not for bread and not for water. Kiyim lishma divrei Hashem, only will be a great thirst to hear the word of God. And that's the point, because once you get it, you realize it becomes, you can't, you anticipate it. You can't live a day without it. And that's the beauty. And that's really what this Gemara is saying. Let's go further. Miyad tinoikis. If you remember, we said on the last day of Yontif, on the seventh day, after you do the mitzvah of lulav and esrog, you can take the lulav and the esrog from the kids, right? So the Gemara says like this: Amar Rabbi Yochanan, esrog v'shvi asa. No, in fact, the Yochanan says esrog on the seventh day is also to use in a profane way, in a chol way, like a weekday way, even though you were Mekayim the mitzvah already. You got up early in the morning, you davened at the 6:45 minyan, you did a Shana Rabbah, you did all your mitzvahs, even though there's no more mitzvah to be done with the esrog, the whole seventh day, since theoretically you can use the esrog for a mitzvah the entire day, it was set aside for Kedusha, for holiness, the whole seventh day. What? That means you can buy it, you can eat it. Yeah. The Shmini Muta, but on the eighth day, Shmini Atzeres, of course, which is not a day for the esrog anymore, you can use it. Sukka afilu b'Shmini Asura, but a sukkah is also to be used for firework even on the eighth day. And the reason for this, everybody, once again, how many days do you have on the first day of Sukkot in Chutz La'aretz? 2. Because maybe the first day is the real day, or maybe the second day is the real day. If the first day is the real day, then Hoshana Rabbah, 7 days later, is the last day of Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeres is actually its own holiday. But if the second day is the real Sukkot, then in fact Shmini Atzeres is the seventh day. And very good. It's a cut, and that's the Gemara is going to be busy with this now. Because that is the one case we have a tata disasum. Because of uncertainties in the diaspora, it turns out that if at the beginning of the holiday, the second day was really the first, then the seventh day is really the eighth day, which is Shmini Atzeres, which is also another holiday. So how do I go ahead and have 2 holidays going at the same time? Sukkot, where I would have to sit in the sukkah, and Shmini Atzeres, which I don't. Forget about lulav, which is, since it's only the rabbanon, we're going to put it aside. But sukkah, which is only a d'oraisa, I got to worry about it. So he says on the eighth day, since it really still might be sukkahs, right? Afilu shmini asura. The reish lakish shama esrog afilu b'shivi nami muta, and esrog even on the seventh day is permitted once you fulfilled your mitzvah. What are they arguing about? His katse. Reish Lakish holds the esrog was set aside only to do the mitzvah. Once I did the mitzvah, finished doing my mitzvah on the seventh day, I'm done with the lulav and esrog. I can do whatever I want with it. His katse. Rabbi Yochanan says the esrog was set aside for the entire seventh day. In other words, since all day long I could do the mitzvah, its kedusha was set aside for the entire seventh day. You see, our Mishnah says, miyad, immediately, the adults would grab the lulav from the hands of the children and eat the children's esrogim. My love, who are in the gedolim, not just the kids, but even the gedolim, even the adults can eat their esrogim. Says the Gemara, 46b2, loy, no, tinoikis tafka, only the esrogim of the children. Why? As Rashi says, because since it's not a real mitzvah, the only mitzvah was chinuch, to educate themselves, right? Jeff, the kids don't have a mitzvah of lulav and esrog. We only have a mitzvah to educate them. Since the mitzvah is not really in their lulav and esrog, it's only a question of education, their lulav and esrog could be used. But ours, we who do have a mitzvah, a commandment of lulav and esrog, says Rabbi Yochanan, a whole day, theoretically, you can do the mitzvah the entire seventh day. So you can't profane your lulav and esrog until the eighth day. Okay, the only problem with that, by the way, is according to the Mandiyama that says that chinuch is a d'oraisa, is biblical in nature, not rabbinical in nature. If we say that educating your kids, is biblical in nature, then how do you allow them to do it? Because part of the education is to teach you that all day long you could theoretically do the mitzvah. That's my question. I don't have an answer for it, but that's occurred to me that question. Sure, it's the Mount Moisem Espanechem. Right there. That's an it. There is a sheet. They say that it's in the eraser, yeah. Cool. Okay, so now, there are those who say Rabbi Yochanan challenged Rabbi Shlokas. That's the opposite. We grab the little of them and they're striking from the kids, meaning Tanoikas in Gedolim no. Kids, yes, Gedolim no. So you see, because the adults have to hold on to it an entire day because it's holy the entire day. Says the Gemara. Says Rishagish, no, no, the truth is, even adults are allowed to go ahead and profane the lulav and esrog. After they use it as a mitzvah on the morning of the 7th, the rest of the day they can get rid of the lulav and esrog. The reason why it says kids, because that's the normal thing. We took it away from the kids because they weren't that being so careful with the lulav and esrog anyways, and the adults hold the esrog to give to the grandmothers to make into jelly, like I used to do. Right, my grandmother Zimmerman used to take the esrogs and make esrog jelly out of it.
To the mitzvah of the esrog. So if the esrog belongs to them, it's just a fruit.
Yeah, but I said the problem with that is that if I say that education is biblical in nature, then you shouldn't be allowed to do it either. But I don't know the answer to that question. That's what was bothering. Why does he say Sukka is different from esrog? Why does he say that the esrog is permitted for benefit on Shmini on the 8th day, while on Shmini Atzeres, while Sukka is not? If you say we have a problem that the 8th day really might be the 7th day of Sukkos, right? Because if the 2nd day of Sukkot was really the first day, then Shmini Atzeres is the last day. That just like I have a problem, I have a suffix on the Sukkah, I should have the suffix on the lulav and esrog. Amalei, so I told him Sukkah the Chazi later ben Hashemashis, a Sukkah which is fit to be used as a mitzvah during the twilight period of the day before. Of a Shana Rabbah, you might be eating a late meal in Shana Rabbah, which you have to sit in the sukkah until the last minute that sukkah is over. The Isra Mele, so who does if the meal happened to occur at that time? A person is required to sit in the sukkah and eat his meal there. It's kapila ben Hashemashis. It's set aside as a mitzvah all the way till twilight. And since it's muksa ready for twilight, it's got to the kula yomi dishmini. It remains also the whole 8th day. Why? Because the difference from when twilight ends and nighttime begins is such a small period, and you can't really tell the difference in halacha, especially. We say once you aser in twilight, it schleps into the night. Once it schleps into the night, it becomes part of the next day, because the next day starts by Judaism. The night starts the night. It goes night and day. Once it extends into the night, so therefore it's already usher on the night of the 8th. We leave it usher for the daytime of the 8th as well. Masha and Cain, Esrog deloy chazi leben hashmashis, but an esrog is not fit to be used ben hashmashis by twilight. Why? Because when do you take the lulav and esrog? By day. So when it already gets dark, is not the time to take the lulav and esrog. So it's not set aside for ben hashmashis. The truth of the matter is you have a problem ben hashmashis, because then you're only doing the mitzvah b'sofik. Because we don't know, if you remember, according to Rabbi Yosi, ben hashmashis, right? Ben hashmashis is the snap of a finger. So you can't do that. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, Ada Erev, the whole. So that's no. So you started your meal beforehand. You started after mincha. Actually, people do that. People go out on a Shana Rabbah. There's a tefillah on a Shana Rabbah. If you ever know the big tefillah about, we actually say it on Shmini Atzeres, but there are those who say it also on a Shana Rabbah. Okay, that to say goodbye to the sukkah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
right after the mincha. When do you do this? Usually after mincha, towards the end of the day of Hoshana Rabbah, you sit in the sukkah at the end. So what happens if you're being Hasidish and you're sitting in the sukkah, right? You're sitting in the sukkah and it goes into twilight.
Why cannot be? Because not that day, because that night is holiday.
Yeah.
What you saying? You're running.
You
Even if you're Hasidish, you're that's it. You're maybe at the sense of the Mutzer
Well, of course, let me tell you something. The Hasidim will sit in the sukkah to the last minute. You have to remember they don't daven mincha until they daven right before Rebbeinu Tam, like I do. Daven mincha late. There's no rush. No rush. There's no rush. Your wife can light. You can still sit in the thing, and you're not rushing off to shul. It's not like over here. What? No, once the wife lights, they don't do malach.
When the wife light, does she light after Shkia?
So the truth of the matter is, if you hold 72, the truth is you don't have to light the way we light. You don't have to light the way we light. We light at 18 minutes before Shkia. That's Tois for Shabbos for the Hasidim because they hold 72, which means Shabbos doesn't start until 45. So they never light after Shkia because they've taken on Tois for Yontif. But in reality, so they that's it. Yeah, yes, that's the. But they still sit it because they're starting before this Gemara. You start before. Don't ask Kashas on Hasidim. That's it. Their wives are lighting, and they're sitting for Yontif for Shmini. Patience, guys. We got to get to the problem that 8th day has got a problem. On the one hand, it's Shmini Atzeres. On the flip side, it might still be Sukkos. And guess what? The Gemara, it's the one case in Judaism where we have a contradiction and we have no way of answering it.
I'll tell you something.
So let's give you this. Go ahead.
Anyways, they don't have to make that flip because in diaspora we still sit in the sukkah the next day.
Yeah,
He doesn't have to drag it.
We're gonna get to that about sitting in the sukkah the next day. Because in fact, most of us do not sit in the sukkah the next day. We only go in the next morning to make a kiddush to say goodbye to the sukkah, but the night before we don't eat in the sukkah. Okay, I know. That's what I'm saying. So we have to keep going. That's what I said. Let's keep going. The late or everything without a bracha because bracha is in my kevis. That's it. The Levi Omar Esrog Afilu B'Shmini Yasa. The Esrog even on the 8th day is no good. You can't use it. V'Avur D'Shmuel Omar because he held because Levi said since the 8th day right merely be the 7th, right? So therefore it's holy even for the on that 8th day. V'Avur D'Shmuel Omar Esrog B'Shvi Yasa B'Shmini Mutter. On the 7th it's no good. On the 8th it's good. Come Abu Shmuel b'Shmita Levi, and later the father of Shmuel retracted and went according to Levi and said the esrog is even forbidden on the 8th on Shmini Atzeres. Come Rab Zera b'Shita Abu Shmuel, but Rab Zera went back to the original view of Abu Shmuel, and that what? And on the 8th day you're allowed to use the esrog. It's just on the 7th day you're not allowed to use the esrog. Rab Zera esrog shenifsla also leechol kol shiva, an esrog that became possible. An esrog that lost its titum, even on the first day, you're not allowed to use it. It still cannot be profaned. Why? Because when you originally bought it, you sanctified it for all 7 days that you were going to use it. So even though you can't use it, its sanctification is for the 7 days of Sukkot. But that means on the 8th day, which is Shmini Atzeres, I'm allowed to use it. The 8th day might be Sukkot. I'm not worried about it. Amar Rab Zera.
What did they do till Rab Zera, till Levi came around?
Let's talk about it. So the answer, you talk about hundreds of years. And remember, again, I remind everybody, what we are dealing with here is 400 years worth of arguments that sound like they were sitting next to each other around the table. Amar Rab Zera. One should not transfer the 4 minim. Hashana here means the arba minim, the 4 species, the lulav, the esrig, the das, and the arava, to a child b'yoyim tova kama on the first day of Yontif, on the first day of Sukkot, before he himself did the mitzvah. My kama, the yumke miknekani, a child can legally at least midrabanon, but the Rambam holds the Araisa, even biblically, can acquire an object, ekune loy mekane, but he cannot legally transfer the possession because children are inherently selfish. They take, they do not give. So only when a child gets to 11 or 12, 10, 11 or 12, when he learns the ideas of transactions, that we say not only does he own things, but he could transfer. The Rambam disagrees. The Rambam says, in fact, nope. Midiaraisa, until the child grows up, until he's 13, can only acquire, cannot transfer. Anyways, so that's very important. You cannot simply, the games we play, we take things from a kid and all that. You should know that that is not so simple. Because for a child, they don't know that you're playing. They think you're actually taking it from them. And that could be a Shiloh of Geneva.
My question is, what about if the father, like
Doesn't
back
matter.
out,
The father's not allowed to steal from a child's son.
we manage to buy it.
Doesn't matter. If you gave it, if you bought it, you didn't hear what I said. If you gave it to him in his hands and you said, this is your lulav and esrog, he said those words, this is your lulav and esrog, it's his lulav and esrog. Very careful, exactly. And al chinuch, as we're about to see, patience, and only for about a minute. Only for about a minute. Watch what it says. Dinuki mekanile. For a child can legally acquire an object, akunin loikani, but he cannot transfer. Therefore, it comes to conduct lulav sheinu shalai. That if you gave him the lulav and then you took it back, you're using a lulav that's not yours, and that's a problem. Take to you. Now, Michael, 46b3. Can you turn to 46b3? You shall not a person should not say to a child, I will give you something, and then not give him. You're teaching him to lie. You're teaching him to lie. So therefore, the Ramosha has.
Speaking about different things,
But I'm saying that Ramosha holds that when you tell a kid something, when you're doing chinuch, it has. So, for example, when you have to purchase him a lulav and esrog, you're not supposed to purchase him a puzzle, an invalid lulav and esrog. It has to be a privileged thing. When you're purchasing it for him and you tell him it's yours, it's his. Al chinuch, it's his. Because you cannot, and there's cases where the Gemara says, no, we're only trying to teach the kids to be mizares, to be zealous in doing mitzvahs, but we don't really mean it. And Ramosha has sarchil. Says, what's going on?
We're forbidden to take a gift from a child. We're forbidden.
If the child wants to give you a gift, according to the Rambam,
they can.
They cannot. It's not a real gift.
Even if they want to give it.
Even if they want to give it. That's not. I'm saying this is the Rambam. I'm not a Rav. This is the Rambam. The Rabbanan hold that if a child already is old enough to understand transactions, has gotten over the natural selfish tendency of taking. So the Rambam says Bar Mitzvah, but the Rabbanim say it comes earlier when a kid's already 9, 10 and understands the idea of sharing, right? Then that's something else. And at that point, transaction works.
I'm sure my 7-year-old granddaughter understands this concept.
And that's sure. We paskin, we don't worry about it. We take things from our grandkids, right? And usually we give it right back to them. We say, this is so sweet. But if they drew you a card or something like that, you put it up. But if they give you something, what do you usually go? You go, let's say if they give you a lollipop, you go, that was great. And then you give it to them back. Okay? So let's keep going. And we argue on Rabbi Shimon regarding one who designated 7 different esrogim, one for each day of the 7 days. Each one that you use each day, you yaitzi a mitzvah of that day, and then you can use the esrog. right? Each one that you use is fine, but you can only eat it the next day because the whole day is misugel to be able to use that esrog. It was set aside to do the mitzvah. Once I did the mitzvah, it's perfectly good to go. It was set aside for the entire day, since the entire day is royal to do the mitzvah. So therefore, the entire day I can't use it, I got to use it the next day. And the halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan that the esrog is also the entire seventh day. However, Rabbi Yochanan was discussing Eretz Yisrael, where there's only one day of Yontif is observed at the end. There's no Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah. It's called Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah is one day, right? Because they don't have the problem. But in the diaspora, by the way, because 2 days, because we don't know which day is really Shmini Atzeres. Because on the first 2 days of Yom Tov, I'm not sure which is the first day. Patient, that's our Gemara. How could you do that? Says the Gemara. See, you already know what we do, but how do you know? Vanan Islay Trey Yoima. Well, we who live outside of Eretz Yisrael and have 2 days of Yom Tov. Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, and the reason why we have it is because Shmini Atzeres, I'm not sure if it's the last day of Sukkot or the first day, or in fact the last day of Shmini Atzeres. Shmini suffix, the 8th Amar Abaya. What do? Amar Abaya, Shmini suffix should be also the 8th day, which is possibly the 7th day. The Hesed remains also. Tishi suffix Shemini Mutter on the 9th day, which is possibly the 8th day, but at worst, the 9th day is Simchas Torah. At worst, is only Shmini Atzeres, which is no chiyuv of esrog. It's permitted. Merema Amar Afilu Shmini suffix Shvi Mutter. Even on the 8th day, which is possibly the 7th day, the esrog is permitted because at the end of the day, the mitzvah of esrog is not done on that day. As you can see, even if you decide to sit in the sukkah that day, you don't take a little of an esrog out of doubt, because at the end of the day, it's only rabbinic in nature, so we're not going to worry about it.
That's why I'm mistaken. You didn't say Shmini Atzeres the Chagazeh. You said Chagasukkos. You don't have to go back. You don't have to go over. You don't have to go over.
Because there is,
but
only on the first day, not on Simchas Torah. Okay, now, in Surah they acted like a mayor and they ate the esrog even on the 8th day. Rav Shishi b'reided Abaydi Yomika Abaya v'Hilchas Abaya. The halacha is like Abaya, and in fact we do not do anything profane with our esrogim until after Yom Tov completely. Now, all these questions that you guys were asking about, how is it Shmini Atzeres, is it Sukkot? How can we sit in the Sukkah and say Shmini Atzeres Chagazeh? Right? Now let's get to it. Shemini suffix Shvi. The 8th day is possibly the 7th day of Sukkot, because if the 2nd day of Sukkot is really the first day, then Shmini Atzeres is really the last day, is really a Shana Rabbah. So Shvi l'Sukkah, it's treated like the 7th day with regard to the Sukkah. Like Michael said, sit in your Sukkah, u'Shmini l'Bracha. But the blessing that you make is what? Shmini Atzeres HaChagazeh. That's the contradiction, which has no answer. Rabbi Yochanan says, Shmini l'Zeh. No. If you're going to say Shmini Atzeres HaChagazeh, then it's Shmini l'Shmini, and you don't sit in the Sukkah either, because I don't want to show a contradiction in terms. Very good. 46.4. Masiv, if with regard to sitting in the Sukkah, even Rabbi Yochanan agrees that you do sit in the Sukkah on the 8th day. You do, because it's a suffix. It might be Sukkah. Where they disagree, Livroche. We're on Mem Zayin Amid Aleph, 47a1. We're exactly a daf off. We're going to try to get down to summit at least. And Rashi says, Liyashev b'sukkah, to sit in the sukkah, the bracha, to make the bracha of Leishev b'sukkah. Liman the Amashvi l'sukkah, according to the one that it's Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav, that the 8th day in Golus is treated, Shmini Atzeres is treated like sukkah. With regard to the sukkah, and you got to make the bracha. Why? Suffolk brachas lekula. But the answer is, sitting in the sukkah is a dioraisa, it's biblical. It's biblical in nature. So the uncertainty is a biblical uncertainty. What's the halacha with regard to biblical? Exactly. An uncertainty in a biblical uncertainty, we go stringently, and therefore you make the bracha. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that no, I'm saying Shmini Atzeres Chagazeh, therefore it's even the we're going to consider it the 8th day, even with regard to Sukkot. Obviously, you don't make a bracha, okay? Because we say Yom Shmini Atzeres Chagazeh. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Nokai to Rabbi Yochanan biyadcha. Take Rabbi Yochanan's halacha in your hand. The Rav Huna bar Bizna, v'chol Gedolei Adar, because Rav Huna bar Bizna and all the Gedolei Adar, iklayu v'sukkah b'shmini sofik shmi, and all visited his sukkah on the 8th day, which is possibly the 7th day. This took place in Babylonia. Misa Yosef, they sat in the sukkah, barchuni loy berchei, and they did not make a blessing. Says the Gemara, Dilma Srile command the Amma, but maybe those sages held, like the one who says, that once you make the blessing on the first day of Yom Tov, all the way at the beginning, the first time, it's a mitzvah to midas. Remember? Since you must always sit in the sukkah day and night. One long day. You only make one bracha. Says, no, Gemiri, we have a tradition that may offer also. Rashi explains that, in fact, they were in the field watching their stuff the entire sukkahs and had never sat in a sukkah the entire sukkahs. So the first time they sat in the sukkah was Shmini Atzeres, and they didn't make a bracha. Now, how could it be that the Gedolei Adar didn't sit in a sukkah? It was B'shas Hashmad. There was a gezerah. There was from the Babylonians. They were saying they didn't want people sitting in the sukkah, and they made a rule. The HOA of the time said you cannot build a hut. You can't build a hut. That's why you can't put it in your driveway, hide it in your backyard. No, you have to ask. You have to ask. You have to ask. You have to ask. Don't do it the chilashim. They let you do a sukkah because I'm telling you build a sukkah, but everybody puts it in their backyard near the pool. That's where they put it. Okay, I'm just saying.
But why couldn't they build it in Babylonia?
Whatever there was at that time, a gezerah. There was a, the government came out with a decree. Government came out with a decree. They said, you sure? Okay, then that's fine. You're not in the street. As long as you're not in the street. Very good. Okay, so then fine. And if they give you trouble, you tell them, I'll take it down right after the holiday. Sorry, I made a mistake. Right. Here we go. Udilmo Svirilo Kamandi Oma Chiben Sheberach Yontav Rishon Shuv Einer Mevarach. Once you made the blessing, we said, give me the mapo. Well,
it's called discrimination. They're not allowed to tell you.
Yeah, no, but HOAs, I know it's strange. HOAs, because they're private, entities.
Somebody went, I remember, to court.
And they said, okay.
I'm inside my property. My property.
I guess it's not on the street. Right, it's not HOA. Okay, I'm just telling you.
Not in an HOA.
HOA.
The outside has to go by community rules.
Right, I'm telling you. Listen, I'm telling you, you can put it up because there's no question about putting it up, but I don't know if you should be putting it up in the front. You'll ask the guys. You'll ask the guys on the block. You'll ask the guys on the block. You're right next to Schwartz. Ask Schwartz what he does every year. Right, I know, and also you're tucked away in the corner. No one's going to see you. Anyways, Ikadiyamri, let's keep going. Ikadiyamri, Beruche, with respect to the blessing on the sukkah on the 8th day. And everybody agrees you do not make a blessing. And that's the way we hold today. Of course, if you sit in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, we do not make a blessing. Where do we are?
Christ, we only made the blessing on the first
Yeah.
day. That's the basis of this ruling.
No, the basic of this ruling is we're making this ruling with regard to the 8th day itself and the Tata Desasha, the Stira.
Every day was the Rabbanah. And so therefore
Not Sukkah, not Sukkah. Sukkah has a mitzvah every day. So according to some, it was one brach of everything. We hold that no, every time you go into the sukkah, it's a new mitzvah, and you go in, you have to sit in the sukkah, but it's new mitzvah every time. Because it's the 8th day, and now you're saying Shmini Atzeres and Chag Hazeh. The contradiction becomes problematic. And because brachas eino ma'akeves, blessings do not cause a problem. If you don't make a blessing, you still fulfill the commandment. So let's stay out of it. Okay, they only argue with regard to sitting in the sukkah itself. That you look at it as that it's like that. It's like the 7th day. You sit. That it's both an 8th day for this and for that. You say Shmini Atzeres and Chag Hazeh, and therefore it's like the 8th day with regard to sukkah. You should not sit in the sukkah. Amar Rab Yosef, and now we're coming to our halacha. Amar Rab Yosef, give me a second. Amar Rab Yosef, Nikit Rab Yochanan b'yadav, take Rabbi Yochanan's hand in ruling in your hand. The Mara Dishmai Tamani, who said according to Rav that one should dwell in a sukkah even on the 8th day. Rabbi Yehuda Bereder of Shilas Bashilas, Ushmini Sopik Shavi Labar Misukkah Yosef, but he himself dwelled outside the sukkah on the 8th day when it was possibly the 7th. And that is the Hilchasa. Now we come to our halacha. The Hilchasa Mesa V'Yasvinan is that we do dwell on the 8th day in the sukkah on the 8th day, which is possibly the 7th. But we don't make a blessing. Now, how is it that we people, us Ashkenazim, says of Leisha Basukah? Now, how is it that us Ashkenazim, in fact, mostly do not sit in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres? We only pop in and pop out, but we don't really have it. So I'm talking about the first day of Shmini Atzeres. So the answer is as this. First of all, we all come from Eastern Europe. And in Eastern Europe, 2 parts happened. By the time you got to Shmini Atzeres, it was freezing. So they said, Mitzvah is Potem and Sukkah. But the Hasidim said, not to do the mitzvah sukkah is so painful, I'm going to stay in the sukkah. But on Shmini Atzeres, which is already an uncertainty, they said already, Mitzvah Potem and Sukkah. Someone who's in pain is put in. Second, it happens to be that Shmini Atzeres was a big time.
Really doing the right thing.
That's it. Yeah. So 1 second. That's why I told you a while ago. Then 1 second. Now, second, in the Haim, back in Eastern Europe, the Shmini Atzeres Simchat Torah was a time when the Hasidim came to visit the Rebbe. Then the Rav, the Rebbe, that's when thousands of Hasidim would come to bells. So therefore, since it was a mitzvah to be the rabbi, the sukkah wasn't big enough. They were mitzvah, they went back inside to the shul. And so he writes the Mashak, the original Semi Ayarub, said that was the reason why they didn't sit in the sukkah. Now, if it happens to be that the Satmar Rav is Chisi, the great the Satmar Rav, right? May his memory be as a chus to all of us. He used to say, our minig is not to sit in the sukkah. But if you happen to find yourself in the sukkah, great. So the Satmar Rav somehow found himself in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. That's how he did it. He did it. I'm Shmini Atzeres, of course not. Shmini Atzeres. He happened to find, if the weather was good, he would say, let's eat in the sukkah. Let's eat in the sukkah. Let's have one more night in the sukkah. Wouldn't say why. And then they were eating in the sukkah. And then the next day they made the kiddush in the sukkah, right? We always make the kiddush in the sukkah, Shmini Atzeres, right? To say goodbye to the sukkah. He said, we're here already. Let's march in the sukkah. And that's how we do it. So he wouldn't say you have to eat in the sukkah, because the reality is, the halacha is, if you can, eat in the sukkah, even Shmini Atzeres. Now, it happens to be this year's sukkah is very early. For those who are going to be in Florida, sukkah is very difficult because it's very, very humid in September, and it's very rainy in September. So, especially the first night of Sukkot, you don't waste any time. You get in there, you quickly make hamotzi, and if it starts raining, you go into the house, because otherwise you might be up a whole night waiting for your window of opportunity. Certainly on Shmini Atzeres, if the mosquitoes are biting, and it's so brutally hot, on Shmini Atzeres, you can you can say that you're a mitzvah and you can go in.
I disagree.
But my father disagrees.
You know why?
Why?
Because it says that that in
Laws and Lavai.
the goyim are going to say to Hashem, give us another chance. He said, okay, we'll go into the sukkah, and he's going to make it very hot, like in Florida, and
Right.
they're going to run out. So you want us to be the same?
Oh, the difference is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to do it on Sukkot. By the way, why Sukkot? Why that mitzvah of Sukkot? Because on Sukkot we bring 70 kabbanot, one for each one of the nations. And I believe it's Zechariah the Navi, that says that eventually the Goyim will come, Mashiach will come, and they will bring sacrifices on Sukkot as well. Sukkot is going to become a universal holiday.
But it has already in Israel.
In Israel, it's becoming universal.
In Israel, it's full of non-Jews.
Right. So,
I wanted to ask you.
because they know that it has something.
100,000 goyim internationally come in Chol Hamoed Sukkos and walk down the entire Rehov Melech HaDavid. 100,000 of them. They call it Feast of the Tabernacle.
Really?
There you
Yep.
go. So that's and you should know. No. Zechai that's a sign of Mashiach. The sign of Mashiach, because it says ultimately Sukkot will be a universal Yom Tov. That's why the Rabbanim Shalom is taking Dafka Sukkot and telling them Sukkot is your Yom Tov too, right? And coming and thing. So
Forget about sleeping in the
not Sukkot on Shmini Atzeres. Oh no, you can try. Yeah, you can try. Let's quickly go down. Okay, guys, I just want to quickly get to. I want to just quickly get to the end of the again atomic days, so we get close. Okay, it's getting very late. Okay, so we're gonna stop in about a minute. We're gonna stop right here. Let's stop.